If there's one thing the Chinese EV market is good at, it's taking features we once thought unattainable and bringing them down to the masses. Case in point, the scissor-doored Hyper GT, an electric sedan that sells for less than $35,000 US.
Welcome to Wheels Boy, where we cover the newest, coolest, and wildest vehicles from the Chinese car market. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Let me start by addressing the fact that this probably isn't the Hyper model that you were hoping I'd review. That would be the wild Hyper SSR electric supercar, which goes from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour faster than I can say 0 to 100 kilometers per hour.
Still waiting for that invitation to drive the SSR? Come on, Hyper, don't make me beg, because I will.
The Hyper SSR is the Halo model. This Hyper GT, which costs $30,000 to $46,000 US, is the one that your average Joe might actually be able to afford. But worry not, because the GT is a fascinating electric car in its own right.
The Hyper GT's crowning achievement is undoubtedly its claimed drag coefficient of just 0.197. That number makes it the world's most aerodynamic production vehicle. Thing is, great aerodynamics don't always result in great looks. This thing is smoother than a baby's bottom, but I don't know, I don't really think they left a lot of space for character, at least here on the front end. A little flavor is injected, however, when you reach the side and the rear of the design. I quite like the way that the body rises here at the C-pillar to meet the sloping roof at this black panel right there that separates the two halves. The taillight design, also very nice. Still though, I can't help but feel that this design isn't dramatic enough to justify a name like Hyper GT.
I think the folks over at Hyper recognize that fact, which is why they started throwing curveballs. That starts with the electronically deploying multi-part rear spoiler, much like the one on the Porsche Panamera. It costs an extra $1,600 US to option.
Of course, that pales in comparison to the electronically operated scissor doors. These cost $2,700 USD to option, and they do a lot to make up for the deficit of drama on this design. They also give this sedan kind of a reverse mullet of sorts. Instead of being business in the front, party in the back, it's party in the front, business in the back. Here's a particularly useless piece of information that I found interesting. You see this little rubber cap here on the corner of the door? This is here because Chinese regulations state that you're not allowed to have sharp corners at certain heights or above a certain height. Now, you could have designed, or they could have designed a smoother radius for this corner, but that would have resulted in a kind of gap when you close the bottom of the door. So this is a much better solution because instead of costing millions of dollars, it costs 2 cents. If you're interested in buying this or any other Chinese vehicle, reach out to us via email at sales@wheelsboy.cn. Unless, of course, you live in the United States or Canada, we can connect you with a reliable exporter of Chinese vehicles.
The combination of a steering wheel shaped like a lunch tray and an instrument cluster that seems to be mounted multiple meters away from you makes the interior of the Hyper GT feel very spaceshipy. But neither of these things makes for a particularly ergonomic experience.
The ovular steering wheel is nowhere near as stupid as a full-on yoke, but it's also not as ergonomic as a regular round wheel would be. The issue with the instrument cluster, well, you can probably guess. At 8.8 inches, it's too small and too far away. Your vital information like your speed and your gear selection are highly visible, but below that, smaller information like your range or your tire pressure on the menu, well, they're just hard to parse at a glance, and in my opinion, that makes it a bad instrument cluster. I will give them props for this 14.6-inch center screen, which has a UI and UX that are both very attractive and functional. I quite like the way you can download a ton of different apps on this, and I like the way that they've layered the menus here on the main screen so that you can go through them from left to right like this, but also up and down like so. That allows you to access a ton of functions very easily.
There are a couple of funny things about it though. For example, there's a menu that's supposed to correspond to the suspension and power, but when you open it, you'll find buttons for the auto hold, emergency brake, and comfort braking systems. Not exactly sure what any of those have to do with suspension and power.
My biggest compliment, however, must be reserved for the sound system, which is 23 speakers with Dolby Atmos surround sound. Are you ready for this? As standard. That's right, even the cheapest version of this car comes with this 23 speaker surround sound system. The cheapest version of the car also has standard heated front row seats. If you go even one trim level up, you then get heated and cooled, as well as a massaging driver's seat. That's a good mix of features for that price point.
Material quality, including the optional $1,000 leather seats, is on par with the likes of the Xpeng P7i or the Tesla Model 3. Nice, but not fancy. The rear seats are among the most comfortable I've experienced in this segment, though I wish there was more than one USB port back there. Hyper has declined to issue any specific info about the trunk of the GT, but based on its length and depth, I'd say it's more than a match for its competition.
While most EVs in this entry-level premium segment have both a single motor and a dual motor variant, this one is rear motor only. It does, however, have two different power levels. There's 180 kilowatts and 355 newton meters of torque, or you can upgrade to this bad boy, which has 250 kilowatts and 430 newton meters. That number is enough to make it the fastest rear-wheel drive vehicle in this segment, with a 0 to 100 of just 4.9 seconds. Thanks to the fact that it doesn't have to deal with the added weight of a front-mounted motor, the front end of this thing feels a little bit lighter, a little bit more maneuverable than the dual-motor EVs that I've driven in the past. The steering feel isn't quite as good as something like a BYD Seal or a Tesla Model 3, but I do think it's as good as an Xpeng P7i, which I did not expect. The suspension tuning is also pretty impressive. It manages to stay flat in the corners while also being composed over bumps. It'll also wag the tail a little bit, break the tail end loose if you really hit the accelerator hard, which I gotta admit is quite a bit of fun.
There are some other advantages to this rear-wheel drive platform and slippery design, particularly when it comes to range. The GT can be had with a 60, 70, or 80 kilowatt-hour battery pack, with ranges from 560 to 710 kilometers on the CLTC cycle. To get close to that 710 kilometer range on a BYD Seal, for example, you'd have to buy the rear motor long-range version, which is a full second slower to 100 kilometers per hour.
The lack of a dual-motor powertrain does make me kinda doubt it as a value proposition, however. Not because I think that a 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time of 4.9 seconds isn't fast enough. It's more than fast enough. But because once you start selecting options like the leather seats, the spoiler, the scissor doors, the price will be as high or even higher than the dual-motor variants of other EVs. I just feel like customers aren't going to like getting less for their money. If you opt for the most expensive trim level like we have here, it also adds a Lidar-based driver assistance system, which adds thousands of dollars to the price tag. Granted, the only other electric sedan with scissor doors and Lidar units that you can buy is the Xpeng P7i Wing Edition, and that costs exactly the same as this one. The thing is, that car is a dual-motor powertrain, and it has a driver assistance system from a company that's known for its driver assistance systems. Hyper, on the other hand, is not.
So, if the only thing that matters to you is impressing everyone when you roll up to the party and open the doors, just save your money and skip the Lidar.
If you option it correctly, however, the Hyper GT could be one of the most interesting options available in the entire Chinese electric EV segment, provided you're looking to be a bit more outgoing.